Right, so I started work this morning then on restoring the Major. So she actually starts really well, but she's quite smoky, and having a little bit of a look, there's quite a lot of crud. She's quite coked up. I notice as well that the hose here for the air cleaner is broken, and looking inside there as well, again, you know, she's quite coked up. So first job that I've done, I just drain the oil off. So the oil plug is there, that's for the engine. And then there's another one just there, which is for the gearbox. And then there's another one down the back as well, with the associated fill points. So it's pretty cold today, so I wanted to get it up and running. And I've got it on the stands as well, so for the hydraulic oil, etc. at the back. I've had it running for about 15-20 minutes just on tick over in second gear. So the wheels have been turning, warmed all the oils up, and they're draining out nicely. Now the engine oil itself, it isn't too bad. It's very black, but actually I've seen a lot worse, so I'm quite happy with that. I'm going to grease up all the pins and everything, but actually the steering is quite tight in it, which is good. It's had a recent diesel filter. Not too sure when the oil filter was last done, so I'm going to do that as well. Notice a little bit of a leak on this diesel line here, so we'll just check all that, make sure they're all tight. I'll have the rocker off anyway, and so I'm going to decoke all this and clean it all out. Hydraulics and everything work. I need to do some repairs to the rear wings because they're just they're a little bit rusty at the bottom. That's the problem. But actually, the rest of them, they're okay, they're serviceable. So I'm not going to do a full restoration on this like I did on the Massey. I'm not going to replace all the tin work because actually I'm going to use this for the tractor runs. But it's relatively solid. It doesn't need doing. Whereas on the Massey, the 35, it was a bad addict, to be honest, that tin work. So, but she's a big tractor, the Major. Dogs come to help. She's a big tractor. She runs really well. Now, interestingly, what I've found out is the castings on the block indicate that the tractor itself, so all the back end, the bell housing, the gearbox, etc., that's all from an early 1955 Major, whereas the engine is actually from a later Super Major. And I found that out by the casting code on here, which is November 23 Hotel N23H, which indicates that's from a 1962 Super Major. So it's obviously had an engine put in at a later date. It's not a problem. This engine actually has about an extra 15 horsepower compared to the original, which would explain why it goes so well for a Major. But apart from that, you know, the wheels are of the correct date. It's the original tank. It's only the engine that at some point has been swapped out. So I don't mind that at all, because it actually runs so well. So yeah, so carry on draining the oils today, get all the oils drained out, and then we'll start to degrease the block and everything else. And start to clean all the wheels up. I've got some paint for them already. Then I'll mask off the associated areas, and I'll paint the block and everything at some point, and the gearbox and the back end. Nose cone will come off today as well, and yeah, it's going to be a really good project, to be honest. I'm actually really pleased. I picked it up for not a lot of money at all. So, you know, I don't particularly want to spend a vast amount on it, but I do want to get it up and running for the vintage shows that we've got coming up near us, and a few tractor runs, and actually use it. I'm going to take it down the field and probably stick a plough on the back, and we'll see how she goes. So I'll keep you posted. So, bit of an update then. Just as we're coming to a close on day one. So there's an engine water tap there, pretty rusty in colour, but it did have some pink coolant in there, so that's kind of added to the colour. Obviously took the nose cone off, had a look at the injector pump and the diaphragm on the lift pump. There was a little bit of a leak around there, so just tightened up all these unions. Had a look at the rocker as well, so took the rocker cover off and had a look, made sure everything's as it should be, and that's all good. Drains the oil filter this side, cleaned all the housing out, thick with gunk. So this really was due for a real good service. So plan next is to properly flush the radiator with some water, and to flush the engine block as well. So in order to do that, what I'll probably do is take off this top hose here, and I would imagine there's a thermostat in there. Not 100% sure, but I would imagine. So I'm going to take this off, flush the engine, make sure that all the water journals are nice and clear. Anything obviously then will run through the tap and into the bucket below. And yeah, it's just steady progression really on day one, but so far so good. And that was the other thing, interestingly, when I took off the cap here for the lift pump, you can see the little handle here, made sure that the fuel was coming through nicely up to the top of the filter, which it is. But when I took this diaphragm off, inside there, it was actually, again, full of gunk. So, that's obviously rubbish that's come through the fuel tank at some point, because you've got your main feed here from the bottom of the tank, and the tap comes through this line and obviously down into the lift pump, at the bottom of the lift pump where the diaphragm is. So that runs off the cam inside, creates a vacuum, pumps it up into here, into the filter, and then from the filter then into the injector pump itself, and obviously then up through there, out and about. So the reason there's quite a lot of fluid around here is because I've sprayed some degreaser, because I'm going to clean the block off. And actually, do you know what? In the top, it's relatively clean, actually. It's not too bad at all. But definitely much lower down, there's a lot of gunk and crap. So I'll continue to do that. I'm going to do a couple of repairs as well at some point. Bottom of the tread plate down here. And as I've already said, this particular wing is pretty ropey anyway. So, but today is very much mechanical, engine and radiator. And yeah, we'll carry on. Okay, so this is the gearbox oil that I'm draining, and as you can clearly see, it's a little bit like treacle. You can look at the colour. So there's the engine oil, and this is the gearbox oil. Now, I believe, I'm no classic tractor expert, but I believe the colour can change from not being used, not being changed for a long time, water ingress, all those different kinds of things. But I've undone the drain plug, and this is how fast it's coming out, which is really slow. What I'm going to do is just see if there's any blockages, which yes there is. Certainly isn't helping, look, at all. Just thick, gloopy. It's coming out a little bit quicker now, but I shall continue to do this. But I think it just demonstrates the fact that, this has not been changed in a long time. So you can imagine this. Okay, there's oil in it. It could be worse. But ultimately, this isn't going to be any good in the gearbox. So this was definitely ready for a change. So let's get all this out. Okay, so we're now underneath the rear axle, and as you can see, there's a large drain hole there, and this has been draining now for best part of a couple of hours. I've even flushed it out and it's still going. It's just this nasty contaminated oil that's got water in. But if you look, there's also a big plate on there, and inside that plate is a filter, and we've got to get that off. That filter has to come off and be cleaned. Otherwise, this horrible substance that's going to be in there will be contaminated, and really won't do it any good afterwards. So that's the next job now, to pull that off and get that done. Okay, so to bring part one to a conclusion, I'm losing daylight now. Just to summarise, obviously bonnet's come off, front nose has come off. I've taken the manifold off because it was all coated, decoated the intake, I need a new top hose. I've took the air cleaner off because the bottom of that was absolutely rubbish, so that wasn't holding any oil. I've dropped the gearbox oil, I've dropped the back axle oil, I've dropped the engine oil, I've cleaned and flushed the radiator and the engine. I've nipped up all the lines on the diesel pump and the injectors and the filter and the tank. And what I've also done here on the diaphragm is check the rubber seal on that one, and that's about it. The last job now is to finish the metal gauze that I was showing before on the filter. But again, running out of daylight now. What I have managed to do is get that part off, which kind of sits underneath it, and then the gauze sits here, but then there's a big plate that sits there that's actually fixed to the underside. So I've simply run out of daylight now, and even with torches it's not ideal. So what I'm going to do is just continue to let it drain into that bucket overnight, because it's just thick sludge. Get it all out, flush it again tomorrow, and then yeah, when we've got some more daylight, carry on.